back, students. Let us continue with our discussion with the third module, that is personality. Today in this discussion and lecture series, I am going to discuss about some other factors that are responsible to evoke or suppress or other determining factors related to personality traits. How any situation can determine a particular behavior, or what particular behaviors are manifested in a particular situation. They are contrasting statements that I have made, but ultimately what is the role of personality in determining these two factors, personality and situations. This is another factor. We have till now discussed about some different frameworks, right, which are very much internal or external to understand. At the same time, situation also plays a very important role, where personality is transformed into behavior, or some specific behaviors are being manifested in particular situation. So, the effect of personality traits on organizational behavior may depend on the situation. Any particular situation can transform any personality into a different form of behavior, which can be desirable or undesirable, or any particular behavior can be manifested in any particular situation. Situation is not impacting, but behavior is being easily identified in one particular situation. So, two theoretical frameworks have been laid by the researchers, that is situation strength and trait activation theory, and how they interact to inculcate or evoke different kind of behaviors. If we talk about situation strength theory, it focuses on the influence of the situation on behavior, that how any situation is impacting the behavior, while traits activation theory emphasizes the role of individual trait in situation, where individual trait is not changing, but it is being inculcated, it is being evoked in a particular situation, that how a person will respond in a particular situation, whereas in situation strength, how the situation will actually transform personality into a particular pattern of behavior. So, understanding how these two theories work together in different situations is crucial in understanding the influence of personality on behavior. So, let us continue more into detail about these theories, the situational strength in the workplace, or the situational strength theory. Some researchers have speculated that organizations are strong situations because they impose rules, norms, standards that govern behavior. Obviously, it is not only that organization is there, some objective is there, common goal is there. There is hierarchy, and there is a hierarchy, and above the hierarchy are some rules and regulations which govern the whole organization based on what is acceptable, what not acceptable, what ought to be expressed, what not ought to be performed. So, there are prescriptive and proscriptive forms of behavioral patterns that are described by any organization, and they sometimes they are also a form of constraints which are usually appropriate. For example, an organization would not want an employee to feel free to engage in any sexual harassment or follow questionable accounting procedures or come to work only when the mood strikes. That means discipline is there, right? Laws, legislation is there, where people are being constrained to put control on their behavior. So, this is the strength of any organization. At the same time, it is also not always desirable for organizations to create strong situations for the employees to several reasons. Now, it is a contrasting situation, that if at one point organizations are strong situations where rules, regulations, norms and standards of behavior are being governed, so that the behavior is appropriate and constrained, then at the same time this kind of strength of the organization is also like inappropriate at certain point of time, because it inhibits creativity, it inhibits the autonomy or environmental mastery of any employee. So, first is that why at the same time, why it is not always desirable for organizations to create strong situations. It is both the ways. So, why not? So, there are certain reasons which have been speculated by OB professionals, that why to certain extent strong situations are also not desirable in any organization. So, the first reason is that the elements of situation strength are often determined by organizational rules and guidelines, which add some objectivity. However, if the perception of these rules influences how the person will respond to the situation's strength. For instance, a person who is usually self-directed will not require to follow a step-by-step instruction to perform a particular task. Rather, he would question the organization that maybe they are doubting their competency or ability. Whereas, on the other hand, there can be people who are rule follower and might appreciate the detailed instructions. So, in this case, in the first example, two people are there and they have contrasting opinion that what if the organization has a strong situation. So, if the situation is extensively strong, then it becomes difficult for any person who would not like to be imposed so much of rules and organizations. Rather, he would prefer to have more freedom to perform the task, where he can experience some kind of discomfort and may develop a sense of or tendency to leave the organization. Or on the other hand, there are people, there are employees who prefer to work under directives, that this is how step by step they have to follow the task and they are happy to perform that kind of job. Thus, their responses will reflect their perception of the situation. Now, once the situation is being perceived, then it impacts the behavior. So, if any employee who would not prefer to work under directives, then his behavior will be transformed or personality will be transformed in different form, maybe in terms of dislike or displeasure. Situation strength theory proposes that the way personality translates into behavior depends on the strength of the situation. Situational strength is defined as cues provided by the external or environmental forces regarding the desirability of potential behaviors. That means, the situation is the external force and they put pressure on the employees how to behave or respond in a particular situation. Now, that pressure is actually the transforming of the personality into a specific behavior in that particular situation. So, situation is the dominant factor, it is a determining factor to define the personality of that person. The consequence of psychological pressure to act in a certain way is the likelihood that individual's personality will act in a certain manner. So, it is a psychological pressure, though it is environmental cue, but it is a psychological pressure that an individual perceives and how the person will transform his personality into behavior in that particular situation. So, strong situations show us the right behavior and pressure us to exhibit it and discourage the wrong behavior. But this kind of strength will only come when the employee is able to understand the situation, that whether the situation is right or wrong, apt or inapt, and how the person will transform his behavior or personality in the right form of response. Whereas, in weak situation, no matter what happens, anything goes right or wrong, if the person fails to understand the situation, then maybe it is very difficult to understand the situation and the person takes freedom to respond in a very free manner. That means, an individual is free to express his personality in behavior. It has become easy for the person to understand or predict behavior in weak situations than in strong areas. That means, the more the situation is understandable for a person, the more the person is able to respond appropriately or in a very desired manner in any strong situation. If the situation is very weak, where the cues are less, the person finds difficulty to understand the situation, then the person becomes weak, the situation becomes weak and the response can also sometimes go wrong. But if it becomes consistent for any person, then also it becomes easy to predict behavior of that person in every situation. So, what are the 4 facets of situational strength in organizations? In what circumstances the situation of any organization becomes strong? OB professionals have identified 4 facets of situational strength in organizations: clarity, consistency, constraints and consequences. We will discuss in detail the clarity. It is the degree to which the cues about work duties and responsibilities are available and clear. So, jobs high in clarity produce strong situations because individuals can readily determine what to do. It is about the more the jobs are clear to the employees, the less is the ambiguity, the more it is easy for an employee, for any worker to understand, determine what kind of behavior is desirable to perform the job. For example, a job of a janitor probably provides high clarity about each task than the job of many. The other is consistency. The extent to which cues regarding work duties and responsibilities are compatible with one another, and jobs with high consistency represent strong situations because all the cues point towards the same desired behavior. For example, the job of an acute care nurse. Everybody knows that what is the job of an acute care nurse, where lot of patience is required and lot of vigilance is required. And this talks about consistency, where work duties and responsibilities are compatible with one another. With high consistency, it represents strong situations because all the cues point towards the same desired behavior, no matter what. The acute care nurse has that expertise and skill to take care of the patients, and every time she is consistent with his performance and the situation. So, this is about consistency in terms of behavior and in terms of roles and responsibilities. Constraints. The extent to which individuals' freedom to decide or act is limited by forces outside their control. Jobs with many constraints represent strong situations because an individual has limited individual discretion. There is no autonomy where the person can take his own decisions or perform the task in his own manner. He is bound to perform his duty in a specific manner, irrespective of his position, but he will work within his limits. For example, any bank manager whose job is probably stronger constraint than any forest ranger. His job is just taking care of the checks that have been submitted by the customers. Now, his only job is constrained, that this is his job, that is what he can do, not extra and not less. This is his constraint. So, this is inhibition where the job responsibilities are restricted to the person based on his own competency. So, this is about constraints where there is more control by the external or organizational factors and the person cannot take any decision. This is constraint. And the other is consequence, the degree to which decisions or actions have important implications for the organization or its members, clients, suppliers and so on. So, jobs with important consequences represent strong situation because the environment is probably heavily structured to guard against mistakes. That means the rules, the norms are governing in a manner within the organization that makes the organization not only structured, but more robust system has been created so that the consequences, the organizational consequences are more positive in nature. So, this is guarding the organization against all the untoward factors and situations. So, this is about consequences and the organization is responsible for those organizations. This is the broader perspective I am talking about. If we talk about the example of any surgeon, that he performs a surgery and ultimately he is more responsible for the consequence, that makes his profession more strong. So, it is about organization, it is about any profession as well, that how you are performing your duty, that the consequence is absolutely your responsibility and it has to be very much consequential in nature. This is about another facet. So, surgeon's job for example has the higher consequences than a foreign language teacher's consequences. So, it is about from one organization to another, from one job task to another task and how employee fit himself based on his understanding about the strength of the situation. Whatever is the strength, one has to understand. So, just going back to this image, so the four facets of situational strength are parallel: clarity, consistency, constraints and consequence all go hand in hand, they work at parallel levels in order to understand the strength of the situation, irrespective of type of organization and employees working with or in type of any profession. So, this is about situational strength theory. Next is, which we have discussed little bit earlier also, that to certain extent it is also not desirable for organizations to create strong situations for their employees for several reasons. As we discussed in the previous slide, that the first reason is that sometimes the rules and guidelines which add some objectivity to them, however, the perception of these rules influences how the person will respond to the situation's strength. Sometimes the employees are not accepting the rules that govern the organization and they tend to go opposite to them, because it inhibits their creativity. So, this can be a reason that to what extent situation strength also can have some negative impact on employee performance. The second is that when jobs have myriad of rules and a tightly controlled process, the job becomes very dull and demotivating because there is no freedom. So, this becomes very difficult for employees to adjust themselves with so much of tightness in the situation that there is no freedom, there is no breathing space. So, some people may prefer the routine, but some people may need or require to have variety of tasks to perform with full freedom. So, this is a drawback of any situation in any organization. The third is that strong situations might suppress the creativity, initiative and discretion prized by some organizational cultures. One study has found that in weak organizational situations, employees were more likely to behave proactively in accordance with their values. That means, values are there, but when the rules, regulations, norms are not existing in a very concise or organized manner, under such circumstances also organizations take proactive decisions. Members are more proactive, they are more participating with the organizations, and thus creating strong rules to govern diverse systems might be difficult and unwise, because when situation strength is very strong, then there is lot of constraint also. So, maybe one person because of his constraints cannot unleash his creativity to resolve any complex issue. If the situation is weak in terms of governance, then maybe any person can come further to propose any solution to the problem and resolve any complex issue. So, this is another aspect of situation strength theory. So, in sum we can say that managers need to recognize the role of situation strength in workplace and find the appropriate balance. That means, so much of tightness can also break the system, there can be a blast anytime, but at the same time so much of leniency will also have negative impact. So, there has to be a very subtle balance between strength and weaknesses, where there is breathing space for the organization and for the employees, and find a balance where they can use their skills, unleash their creativity in order to perform better and be more creative. So, situation strength theory plays a substantial role in various areas, from decision making to leadership styles and from employee motivation to workplace ethics. So, how it helps in decision making? Managers may leverage situation strength theory to design decision making environments that minimizes biases and errors. The more the situation is strong of any organization, there is more equality in the environment, there is trust in the environment, because that will inhibit discrimination, it will inhibit stereotypical attitudes, it will inhibit biases and errors. There is less chances of any mistakes. In leadership, variations in situation strength may dictate the effectiveness of different leadership style, that in which situation which leadership style will fit better, that is only possible under this situation strength theory, which identifies that as per the situation, situation is very critical, situation is very dominating, situation is very loose, then ultimately which leadership style can capture that moment to control, there lies the implication of situation strength theory in terms of leadership. Regarding employee motivation, managers might adjust situation strength factors to influence employees' motivation levels. Ultimately, the more the situation is strong, maybe it becomes dull and demotivating for an individual, but if there is less strength or there is leniency in the situation, then it can also be a source of motivation, because there is more decision making latitude, increased decision making latitude, there is more creativity fostering. In the realm of workplace ethics, high situation strength environments could reduce unethical behaviors due to clear consequences for violations. This is the application or implication of situation strength theory, where it becomes very mandatory and important and significant for any organizations that more the situation strength is there within organizations, more ethical behavior is prevailing in the organization and reducing and minimizing unethical aspects that prevails in any organization. Thus, this suggests that psychology could not focus on whether personality constructs predict job performance, but rather about the conditions under which they predict job performance. So, it is about situation strength and personality that work hand in hand, and actually they predict job performance, because as per the situation of the strength, personality will be triggered, which will be transformed into behavior, and how that behavior will influence job performance. So, it becomes a mechanism. Understanding the situation becomes a mechanism which will not only impact job performance, but at the same time it will influence which kind of behavioral patterns will actually foster enhanced job performance. Because situation will impact personality, personality will be transformed into behavior, and how behavior will be performed will determine job performance. So, this is the significance of situation strength theory, where personality plays an important role. Another implication revolves around the idea of person environment fit. One of the core ideas expressed in the fit literature is that the mismatch between individuals' needs and environmental supplies can have deleterious effects on performance. This is so obvious that when the person is not fitting the job well, then it has negative impact or detrimental impact on the individual and organizational outcomes. But within the context of situation strength, some employees may view highly constraining environments are stifling and frustrating, whereas others may find regimented and predictable nature of constraining environments to be comforting and relaxing. So, it is about an individual's fit, that which kind of personality can accept situation strength, and in which kind of personalities will not find such kind of situation strength conducive for their own performance. So, we can say that situation strength theory has become a fundamental tool in enhancing organizational functionality and ensuring desired employee behaviors, and by understanding this theory we can apply its principle to improve operations and maintain a healthy work environment, right. The other theory is trait activation theory, developed by Tet and Brunet in 2003. They propounded that trait activation theory and posits that some situation, events or interventions activate a trait more than others. So, trait activation theory foresee which job suits certain personalities. For example, a worker who is more efficient working in as an individual rather than in team will have a higher person organization fit for a workplace than stresses individuals tasks such as accountancy. The idea is that any situation will impact behavior, that is strength of the situation. In trait activation theory, which particular behavior will be manifested or fit any job, it is opposite. So, trait activation theory is extended version of the personality job fit perspective. Here in personality job fit perspective is that which personality will fit the job, right. So, it is founded on a particular model of job performance, and it is a manner in which individual manifest their traits when they are presented with situational cues that are associated with those features. So, these situational cues could originate from social, environmental, organizational or task related cues. So, whenever any cue is there in any organizational environment, it is easy to understand, or the individual can easily understand that this particular trait is fit for this kind of task or organization. So, the more the personality traits are manifested, the more it becomes easy for any organization to fit that person into a particular job profile. So, this is about trait activation theory. Initially it was that which situation will trigger the personality, here it is that which personality trait will fit into the job. So, these cues have the potential to activate personality qualities that are valued by the organization and are related to job responsibilities and organizational expectations. So, these cues have the potential to trigger trait related actions as well, even though those behaviors are not directly linked to work performances. So, the notion of trait activation theory is that workers will strive for a workplace that enables them to easily express their distinctive personality qualities, and will find this environment to be a source of both intrinsic and extrinsic satisfaction. So, the point is that which personality will fit the job will lead to intrinsic and extrinsic satisfaction. It is not directly related to work performance, it is more related to an individual's internal or external satisfaction. It can be a source, because when there is a perfect fit between personality and the job, that leads to life satisfaction, it leads to job satisfaction. So, it is intrinsic and so job satisfaction is very extrinsic and life satisfaction is very intrinsic in nature. So, where you fit yourself, that is more important according to trait activation theory. What are the applications of this theory? The trait application theory promotes situation trait relevance as a general moderating principle. This theory was explicitly proposed to account for variability in personality job performance relationship across different situations. It is not about one task, it is about different situations, that in which situation which personality will fit better. So, organizations have to identify, filter and pick that which personality will fit into which kind of situation and which kind of job. So, there is a mechanism of interrelationship of these factors where personality, situation and performance are working as a trio. So, a given characteristics is said to exhibit bidirectionality when, depending on the circumstances of the workplace, it can either be positively or negatively related to job performance. So, that means when it is about person job fit, it is about bidirectional, that person is also responding to the job and job is also responding to the person as an employee. There is bidirectionality, but at the same time it can be opposite also, that that it can either positively or negatively related to job performance. You never know that the person who is fit for a particular job may not be giving that job performance to mark, maybe it can be other way around. So, this is the first application. So, the cross situational consistency in behavior is understood to be function of similarity in situation trait, which is relevant and is a hallmark of stable trait. So, the major understanding of this application is that when there is bidirectionality in terms of positive fit, then the outcome is positive, job performance is high because there is a perfect fit. But if there is cross situational consistency, then it becomes difficult to find that fit. So, therefore, this theory is a function of similarity in situation trait, which is relevant and a hallmark of stable trait. So, similarity is very important, similarity between the person and the job. The more the similarity, the more it becomes the hallmark of a stable trait, that this trait is stable in this particular situation. So, there is consistency, there is no bidirectional trait that is working between person and the job. The other is dynamic interaction, which refers to the two-way chain of causality that exists between characteristics and events. It is about parallel process, that how any trait is manifested and it will increase situational cues in a positive feedback or it can decrease, that is in the negative feedback. Now, the point is that how that interaction will take place between the personality and the job. It goes parallel. The trait that is more fit for a particular job is going in parallel, but it also depends on the feedback, that which trait manifest can either increase trait relevant situations, or that is the more positive feedback the person will get, or it can also decrease that process in terms of negative feedback loop. For example, any personality that is fit for marketing job, it will go into parallel, but at the same time to what extent that interaction will happen in form of feedback, that feedback can be negative or positive feedback. You never know that a person who is fitting well with the marketing job, when it comes to feedback of the job performance, it can either be negative or positive. So, that is the extent to which any trait has been manifested to a larger extent. The more manifestation is productive, the more feedback is positive. It is not necessary that if a trait has been manifested as per the job, then definitely, or situation, then definitely the feedback will be positive. It can go other way around. So, this is about the dynamic interaction, which refers to the two-way chain of causality that exists between characteristics and events, because in that process, when the trait and the situation are working, what will be the characteristics of the event, what changes will occur in that event or situation, that will also play a very important role, and those changes in the event will actually finally will define or decide that what will be the quality of feedback, that is positive or negative. Thus, we can say that trait activation theory is an approach to person workplace fit that is based on the idea that people are happier and perform better in jobs, groups and organization in which they are rewarded both intrinsically and extrinsically. It is an extension to what we have just talked about. It is about dynamic interaction. You perform well based on your trait and manifested trait and the job, but feedback is negative or maybe you are not rewarded equally, then that can become ineffective. Thus, a trait activation theory methodology can easily be extended to include personally oriented work analysis. So, job analysis, work analysis means what kind of expertise is not required, what kind of qualification is required, plus most importantly which personality trait is needed to be manifested to perform a particular job. Situational taxonomies which are frequently requested but seldom produced can be derived with trait activation theory by identifying classes of situations that are similarly trait relevant. This is the major feature of work analysis, identifying the situations and then coming up with the classes of situations which are similarly trait relevant to that situation, and then finding or assigning those jobs or tasks to those people who are trait relevant to that situation. So, it is not only about dynamic interaction, it is also about exhibiting bidirectionality and cross situational consistency. The other is it has application which provides an interactionist basis for establishing teams. Teams should be more viable when members not only have what it takes to handle the demand of their team, task and roles, but also have what it takes to bring out the best work in one another through mutual activation of traits. So, it leads to appropriate teamwork. When people understand situation and they know that which member can exhibit which kind of trait as per the situational, then it creates an interactionist basis which will foster overall interaction among members. This is the application of this theory to identify and even form teams based on trait and task. According to this theory, previously dominant characteristics become manifest when specific circumstances are met. As a result, it acknowledges the potential for both heritable characteristics and environment factors to influence repeatable patterns of behavior. It is about teamwork only, that identifying people with similar traits, forming team and then understanding the situation, that how each and every heritable characteristics or distinct and consistent characteristics of any individual employee can be manifested in that situation, where repeated behavior pattern is maintained and ultimately we are achieving the goals, because we know that which team member will have a particular trait to fit into a particular task. So, he or she will repeat the same pattern of behavior and the job performance or outcome will be positive and enhanced. So, this is about the two theories which we have talked about, situation strength theory and trait activation theory. Trait activation theory which works in concert with personality and how it enhances job performances. So, in nutshell we can say that when we are talking about personality, it becomes a very significant aspect to be discussed in organizational behavior, because when organizational behavior professionals are working with human resources or people at work, they not only focus on their qualifications or on their expertise, it is also more about as a human being who fit well into the organization, perform the task and take the organizations to new heights. So, that is all with the discussion. We will come up with some more positive and constructive discussions in this unit. Thank you so much.